I love you, Deirdre. Um, which we have one of the largest Head Start programs in the state. So obviously we have poor people in Johnson County. You know, they just know nobody else thinks they're poor, right? Yeah. So when Monica asked me, she goes, "Well, what do you think would be important to talk about?" I kind of gave her this list of topics that I felt like were important to just kind of update people on. And I went to some of the MISHA trainings that happened with their conference, which was all virtual, and talked a lot with Ruth Stokel, who retired from Mayo's Clinic, and her specialty was childhood apraxia speech. And she gave me some really cool insight on childhood apraxia speech. So I wanted to kind of, I guess, update some of the changes that have happened with childhood apraxia and how it's being approached. Some of you who have been to these trainings in the past, a lot of the set things have not changed, but there has been some subtle nuances that I felt like would be important to have my speechies and others be aware of. So, and I know that, and I feel bad because I know Amy Cook's on here, and I know that we have some agencies, I'm trying to be politically correct here, in Johnson County that are making a lot of money off of this diagnosis. And they're making money by selling their own personal therapy tools that they've created that are very similar to other therapy tools that are already out there. And that they're requiring 4 days a week of intensive intervention in order for the child to make progress. And if you want your child to be successful in preschool, well, they're going to have to come to my preschool for the next, 6 or 8 months before they turn 3, because I will cure them. Of which, and she does use the cure word, by the way, or excuse me, he or she. Oh, that was bad, wasn't it? Yeah. So, oh, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, sue for slander, like literally down the parkway. Although I think I'd stand a pretty good case of winning that one. So when I talked with Ruth Stokel about it, I was talking to her about some of the Kaufman cards that are out there, as well as the prompt method that we've talked about for treatment for this, as well as some of the other treatment methods that are here. So there's been some people here kind of running to the bathroom that I was trying to be respectful of. So I'm going to go ahead and start presenting now. And if you guys cannot see, holler at Monica because she's in charge of the chat room. Monica's in charge of the chat room. And it's so exciting to be back here and to see you guys. And the funny thing is, this is really bad. I thought you were at the old building. So it was like, I called Monica and I was like, did you guys move or something? And Monica was like, yeah. Oh, I think that's about when I left, was about 3 years ago. It's about 3 or 4 years ago was the last time. And so, yeah, that's kind of why I was late getting here and getting set up. And then we found out that we couldn't hook into the system because we're missing an HDMI cord. And it's been fun, hasn't it, Monica? Yeah, yeah, we got the screen going. So, childhood apraxia speech, CAS, commonly referred to, and this is kind of the global term for it. Now, was it dyspraxia? Was it acquired? Was it not acquired? This does make some people sick, but Stacy Pate, I know I'm talking to you. I had a hard time going in and getting rid of some of the animation features, and I didn't want to spend a lot of time trying to do it. So just close your eyes during the spinning times and it'll be okay. The ASHA portal, again, those of you who are members, thank you for being a member and supporting our national organization. Also consider being a member and supporting our state organization of CASHA, because CASHA is helping us with a lot of partnering for ASHA CEUs events. And CASHA is doing a phenomenal job with the whole getting us dual licensure across state lines and advocating for us in those respects. So I know that we get nickeled and dimed with licensure and state organizations and all that kind of aspect. But belonging to your national and belonging to your state are so important. So please support them if you can. So the definition is on the ASHA portal and it has not changed. So it is considered a neurological condition. It is a speech sound disorder in which the precision and the consistency of movement underlying the speech are impaired. And this is in the absence of neuromuscular deficits. However, you can have neuromuscular deficits and still have childhood apraxia speech. And I know back in the day when I would get in chat rooms or talks with my other colleagues here, we would talk about how, well, if you have Down syndrome, then you have motor issues, then, are you going to still have childhood apraxia speech? And the general consensus now is yes, you can. Well, if you have autism, is it the autism talking, or is it that initiation, and therefore it falls under childhood apraxia speech? And the answer is yes, you can have both occurring. So keep that in the back of your mind. But the core impairment is going to be in planning, in programming, and that can result in speech sound errors in production as well as prosody. I had this one kiddo, it wasn't a kiddo, it was like in third grade, who I really suspected childhood apraxia speech with. And I got Dr. Overby helping me, who was doing some, because we used to think that if a child has childhood apraxia speech and they remediate through by 2 or 3, they didn't necessarily have childhood apraxia speech. And what we're noticing now is that there's lingering effects. Well, imagine that, lingering effects. I don't know where that term came from. So the lingering effects of childhood apraxia speech can also impact reading as we go down that pike. So keep that kind of in the back of your head as well. And Megan helped me recognize that what I'm seeing with this kid dealt in the prosody realm, which once a kid can say the sounds, I'm like, hey, that kid's looking good. They can say the sounds and words, they were communicative. I don't need to worry about the rest. But yeah, I did need to worry about that with this kid, and that stress was off. And stress was throwing off how he was communicating with others. So I needed to go back and kind of work on that. I love this quote that once a human being has arrived on Earth, communication is the largest single factor determining what kinds of relationships he makes with others and what happens to him in the world about him or her or she or hers. And so when I keep that in mind, what we do as speech language pathologists and even early interventionists is so key. It's so key because life is all about relationships. It's all about relationships. This too has stayed pretty much the same in that you're looking at these. So we look at what's the diagnostic criteria, and we still argue about this. So there's still difficulty within the profession as to what a child has to exhibit in order to receive this diagnosis. So there's still the Elite Out that's out there, Elite 8 that's out there, which says you have limited consonant vowel combinations, you have frequent omission errors, a high proportion of vowel errors, inconsistent errors across words, alter suprasegmental characteristics. As you increase your mean length of utterance, your errors increase, difficulty imitating, and predominantly use of simple syllable shapes. And Schreiberg, who's doing some really cool ongoing research, Larry Schreiberg, as well as Edith Strand, say that, well, we also feel like you have that slow number 9 DDK or diadochokinetic rate, the intrusive vowel. Those of us who are speech paths, raise your hand. You get the intrusive vowel, that schwa that kind of butts in where they're always going, buka, and you're not buka, it's just book or a book. Distorted substitutions, voicing errors, which I always tend at an early age, I don't care about that. But as they get older, you kind of have to go there. Slowed rate of speech. So those are still pretty much the diagnostic criteria that we see. Sorry for that move, Stacy. Hold your stomach. We are the people who diagnose childhood apraxia speech as speech paths. We diagnose it. How do you diagnose it? Complete history. We do know that there is a familial trait that can run with it, but can also occur without knowing why. It can have an idiopathic response or occurrence. So that complete family history of developmental milestones. The reason I say the developmental milestones is Dr. Overby's research, where she went in and she took video that parents had of children between the 0 age through 12 months and transcribed it. And then later, if those kids ended up having a diagnosis of CAS, she would go back to those early videos and say, what early criteria did they have at a young age that would have let us know, yes, this might be CAS. And it's been really cool to see her research continue to unfold. And I'll go into her research a little bit more, but that's why we need to have those developmental milestones. These children are basically very quiet children. Um, in order for us to diagnose, we need to have connected speech. So if you go into a 2-year-old house and the child is not talking, do they have CAS? Well, according to some individuals in Johnson County, yes, they do. And I've argued with this individual, and basically she won't accept my calls anymore. Imagine that. Because any idiot in their right mind would look at this child and know that they had CAS. And I say, well, your own national organization says do not diagnose until you have connected speech. And now some people, Dr. Overby, Dr. Storkel, are saying if you must diagnose because you're looking at insurance reimbursement, keep in mind that this also could be phonological delay, late talker, severe speech sound acquisition. It could be other issues, and make sure the parent is aware that it could be other issues. It doesn't have to be CAS. And some people are very good about that, and other people's not so much good about that. And it may be secondary to many other diagnoses. And this is something that initially, when CAS first came around, we didn't really feel that it was. We felt like that the other diagnosis took primary. And now they're saying, no, you can have it all. Lucky child, right? To have it all. And so I do use a combination of formal and informal tools. I do not use any of the childhood apraxia speech tools, which brings me up to this lovely little one, which is the verbal motor production assessment. And notice the age that this tool starts at. 3 to 12. Imagine that. So they're not even going to give you a tool that's standardized to work with a child until they're at least 3. But it does look at the 5 main areas, and it will also look at global motor apraxia, not just speech. And it takes a while to administer, and there's been a lot of debate within our profession as to the validity of the tool. But I put it out there because it is used a lot, and it's still used a lot, and there's a lot of good components to it, so you should be aware of it. Oh, good old Dr. Overby. What she found out is that, she went through 24 months, that post phonetic transcription of children. Would you like to be her doc student? And go in and look at that video and transcribe phonetically all those things. She said that it sounded harder than it was because I said, you've got to be kidding me. I would like pull my hair out if I had to transcribe that. She said it's very limited on what the kid says. So you might actually have just the schwa vowel or maybe the E because they can go from the to the E or the but they're not able to do a lot of in between. And then more alveolar versus glottal and velar, more nasal versus glides, and fricatives were pretty much absent. So that I thought was really cool. And her research is ongoing. Very approachable person, by the way, very nice person. Okay, here we go. Prevalence. If you've got a site here in Johnson County where you're seeing, 25 children who have childhood apraxia speech, chances are some of them don't have it. And I think Schreiberg's evidence is probably more in line with what I'm seeing in general, 1 to 2 children per every 1,000 of speech identified children. Okay, so we identify them speech, and we know that 4% to 6% of the population are identified for speech, 1% of that. Okay, so again, pretty low prevalence. It is higher in boys versus girls, but when I've had it in girls, oh boy, are they involved. They seem to be much more involved. These are still the treatment options that are being listed out there in the world. The principles of motor learning, they really want you to use that all the time. That's probably forced down the literature more than anything. There's so much evidence behind the principles of motor learning. So I'll get into that a little bit more in depth. The REST, or the rapid syllable transition treatment, the Aussies, the Australians have set that up. It's for a child who's a little bit older, but the Australians have done really cool things, both with stuttering and with CAS, which again, motor speech issues. The dynamic, tactile, and temporal cueing. This one here is one that Ruth Stokel highly recommends. I probably have fallen more into that integrated phonological awareness where I'll do some phonological awareness stuff and I kind of integrate that along with language. Augmentative communication, there are your AAC people who say they should be on augmentative device immediately. It's like, okay, you feel very strongly about that. I'm not opposed to that. I think augmentative communication only augments communication, but I feel like me deciding as a speech path what device or what type of augmentative communication you need, I think we need to be looking at that more discreetly. And where does is the child signing? That's augmentative communication. Let's go with that. We don't need to put anything else in front of them. Although there are certain agencies in Johnson County that are really, pushing for the use of more augmentative communication for this population. And then I just say, how is it used? Are they actually using it as a communication device, or is it a glorified game player? I don't know. Prompt. Okay, prompt is different in that there used to be what they thought was some pretty significant research to support the use of prompt. And for those of you who are familiar with it, that's where you physically have a motion that you use on the mouth of the child to prompt in the sound. And every sound has a movement that you do to the child's mouth. And the research that was done to support prompt was funded by prompt. And Dr. Stokel says that the research is really not that good to support it. And she kind of has backed off of it. I know that a lot of us have used some cued speech where we're actually, giving some kind of prompt on what sound we want for the child. There are times that I will help close the child's lips when I'm looking for that M sound. But that's not prompt. Prompt is you're all over that kid's mouth and you're moving through everything. And I used to have some video on it and they took the video down from YouTube. So I haven't necessarily seen that. But if you're interested, Google YouTube and it'll show up there and you'll be able to see people doing it. Some of the, when I went through for the Early Start Denver model training, Sally Rogers out of Denver was really promoting the use of prompt for the nonverbal child. And I was saying, are you sure that's really what you want to do? Because, you get some of these children on the spectrum, you get by their mouth, man, they're going to be hitting you and biting you and everything else. And she was like, oh, we've seen so much success with it. And I think her so much success was 1 or 2 cases. So I'm not, anyway, the movement towards prompt has really moved more away from prompt. For those of you who saw my previous said that I was really looking into prompt, well, I really looked into it and I'm not going there. I'm not going to go there with prompt. No, there's several. There's an intro, and then there's your certification process, and it's very much like getting your ESDM training where you have to go through the full 9 yards. And for what? So that you can learn how to physically touch a kid's mouth, and then you send in videos, and they critique your video as to whether or not you're actually using prompt accurately. So no, not feeling that one. If you're going to spend your money, spend it on mental health, social emotional growth and development. Yeah. Yeah. And not necessarily on moving towards prompt. I think that there's stuff to be said on using a multisensory approach. And a multisensory approach would include some kinesthetic tactile touching, but it's not everything, is what I'm trying to say. So the principles of motor learning kind of came from our lovely PTs and OTs. Thank you very much, because it's been awesome studying this. The main goal is to restore impaired motor function. And the studies were mainly with adults. And so then what we're saying is that can these principles be applied down to children? And a lot of the research coming out is saying yes, that they can be. And they're to facilitate the process of motor learning. And as speech is a motor act, it would only make sense, right, that we would look at the principles of motor learning for that to occur. So it deals with the structure of practice and the nature of the feedback. So the structure of practice refers to the actual act of engaging in that behavior repeatedly for the purpose of improvement or mastery. And then the nature of feedback refers to the information related to the sensation within the movement itself. And I'm going to breeze through some of this because with the little tiny ones, it's, you're not going to be able to do all of this. You won't. Small versus large is recommended. Practice distribution mass versus distributed. Practice schedule blocked versus random. Attentional focus, target complexity. Those are the kind of the structure of the practice for principles of motor learning. Nature of the feedback would be knowledge of performance versus knowledge of results. Feedback which would be high, the frequency, or very low, and the timing we would do it immediate or it would be delayed. When I look at reinforcement or feedback, if we get a child talking, the feedback would be the reinforcement that would be naturally occurring within their environment. I might be saying, I like how you put your lips together to make the sound. I might be giving some knowledge of performance. And oh, you said really well, and that would be knowledge of results. And do I do that frequently? Not so much. That's you, Monica. Good job, girl. She's all over it. What I would recommend with the little ones is um, when I'm dealing with childhood apraxia speech, I don't pick one target and then try to get that target in across everything. I will pick multiple targets. And the reason I do that is because that's where the child breaks down. So the child's not able to say the sounds as they build on each other. So I'm going to try to do that more, which doesn't necessarily talk itself or speak to this constant practice, variable practice, random practice, blocked practice. When you get a kid that's in second or third grade that is essentially nonverbal, I'm going to really get in hard to this type of practice. It's going to be blocked and it's going to be pretty constant. But I'm going to vary up the targets. The rest is a program that is used out of Australia. It's only for the older child, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time. It does use the principles of motor learning, and it does, a lot of research is coming out that's showing it's very valid in its approach. Just know the Australians are my friends. Older children, mild to moderate to severe, not suitable for children who just have single syllables, which is what our preschoolers usually do, or young ones. And if a child can't do tabletop work, they're not going to be able to do rest. And that's all still pretty much the same. The prompt, been around for a long time, back in the 70s, right? And again, not a lot of good research behind it. In other words, what Dr. Storker was telling me is that the amount of improvement that a child going through prompt demonstrated versus a child going through rest or principles of motor learning component was about the same. So it's not showing that it's any better than another program. I think this is really important. Um, the goal for all of our children is to have functional communication. And when you're dealing with a child with CAS, we're going to have a lot more planning time for them. But for your little tiny ones, you're going to be going back and forth between language and artic. And you're not going to be able to get out of that. So if you've got a child who doesn't have good language skills, we're certainly going to be working on that from the very get-go. That they're signing for us, that they're using augmentative, whatever it takes to get some language going. And then once we get them imitating us, we're able to move forward. Of course, if you're like Meredith and you have the child who's not imitating you, then you're in another whole ball game, right, Meredith? If you're still there. Treatment goals, I'm going to kind of skip over this a little bit just because with little tiny ones, I try to have my parents pick targets within their environment that the child will be able to do all the time. So if the mother says, I really wish they'd say mom, or I really wish they would say love you, then we might pick that target and have it be across different environments for the child so that it kind of becomes a part of their day. And that's going to be large amounts of practice trial embedded throughout their day, which is a coaching approach. Multisensory approach is you got to see it, hear it, move it, and say it. And you can use the Easy Does It Apraxia of Speech cards, which with the turtle cards, which I have used, at least to get the child to know that there is a different sound for each vowel. So if I have a child that has limited vowel repertoire, the turtles can, I, E, and look at my mouth when I say E, and this turtle says E, and I may just be doing a lot of modeling for them, but then they like to play with the turtles. They think that they're fun. And so children learn through play. So if we can play with turtles and make vowel sounds, then let's play with turtles. I praise attempts because usually the attempts are not accurate, but I want to praise the attempts because if we can just get them trying, then the battle is half won. Good old Nancy Kaufman and Pamela Mashala. They say that using nonsense words can help build that motor pathway, and then you can merge that pathway back into true words. Other people say that using nonsense words does not have a good linguistic foundation, and that if we want a child to have language and they're not able to say those sounds in language, then that's where you need to start your approach and your work. I haven't seen anything out on Pamela Marshala in years. Nancy Kaufman is morphing her training a little bit, and is doing an awful lot of work with children with autism, and she's done some pretty cool work with them. But again, she feels as though she has a very good, strong approach. And if she has trained you personally, then she likes what you have done. But if she hasn't necessarily trained you personally, you may not necessarily be doing her approach the way she would recommend. So um, different. I would keep it with open just because that's a real word. Yeah. And if they say OPA, I would reinforce it. Okay. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. A lot of her the names for the different critters that she has that are all kind of made up names. Sometimes I just kind of skip over those, and I would rather go with the moo moo for the cow sound and the bok bok for the chicken sound. I mean, I might increase it that way, and then I might change that up. So if the chicken was bok 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 biga, and then I change and I add two vowels in there, and the kids think that's hysterical. But then I've created a different motor plan that has two vowels in the middle. So I might, use that kind of a technique. I use a lot of Nancy Kaufman's cards, both level 1 and level 2, but I pick and choose what I need for the child that's in front of me. Does that make sense? And it might be very different. The thing about some of that is then the parents want those programs for their use at home, and then you run into copyright issues on, and I'm sure Nancy Kaufman would not want you Xeroxing her cards. Yeah. Okay, I'm just telling you, she would probably take issue with that. So keeping that, usually I'll go to what I call the barn or the farm training. So we pull out the old farm to play with, and it's amazing how many Kaufman cards are actually located within that farm play when you're dealing with how animals make their sounds and moving from that. So. Functional communication is what we have to deal with. Communication can be low tech and high tech, that augmentative can, which a lot of my recent grads from KU think it's got to be a device and it's got to be LAMP. And, I run into them all the time and I'm just like, the only reason you're selling LAMP is because Prinky Romick ran out of money when nobody would buy their programs anymore because they could get the iPad and use Protocol to Go. So Prinky Romick developed their own LAMP and they're talking about how much better it is than Protocol to Go. And I just feel like you get into these wars with different people who are out making money off the programs, and you have to kind of balance that as a speech path who's trying to navigate those systems. It's tough. I do a lot of backward chaining. Say knee, now say pony. Forward chaining would just say po, then say pony. But don't forget, those are simple strategies that we have as speech paths in our toolbox, and we can always use them with this. And it's a good strategy to teach a parent to use. The Apraxia practice portal, it's got all kinds of really good information in it. I highly recommend it. If you think you have one of these kids, go to that portal. And that's it, ladies and gentlemen. Gentlemen. Questions, comments, concerns? Ooh, have you guys been looking at my nose this whole time? I am so sorry. because of those people out there making a buck off it. And I hate to say that, but that's where I feel like a lot of it is coming from, is from you're having to fight that uphill battle with a parent who's terrified, who's scared because their kid's not talking. And this one professional told them they needed to do this. And the only reason you're seeing infant toddlers is so that they can transition into the schools at 3. It's like, oh, it is, which is why you get paid the big bucks. I see the insurance issue so much with the older child, but not so much with this whole birth to 3. With the birth to 3 population, I mean, that's pretty generic on your CPT codes for that. So it kind of surprises me that they use that as an excuse. So anyway, thank you so much for allowing me into your lunch and learns. And I will go ahead and end the meeting.